Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Marincess deck profile. So this deck is a really cool water-based deck that actually is one of the cooler Cyverse-based decks that came out of Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains. With some of the most beautiful water deck art in the entire game, it's a really fun deck and actually became relatively budget compared to when it was originally introduced. It was really hard to get because a lot of the cards were secret rares and ultra rares and even starlight rares back when it first came out, but now all the cards have been reprinted in the 2020 Mega 10s back in August, so the deck is actually relatively budget. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below because you have those awesome rewards you guys like getting your name description for every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting Txne deck profile every single month as your patron along with test hands. So without further ado guys, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Marincess Blue Tang. So Marincess Blue Tang has a really cool effect that if this card is normal or special summon, you get to send one Marincess monster from your deck to the graveyard. And she also has the ability that if this card is sent to the graveyard as a material for a link summon of a water monster, you can excavate the top 3 cards of your deck, and if you do, you get to add 1 excavated Marincess card from your deck to your hand and shuffle the rest back in your deck, which is really cool because she kind of helps you like a Pot of Duality effect, except without the drawbacks. We then play 3 copies of this Marincess, which is actually probably one of my favorite Marincess cards, because if this card is normal or special summon, then you can special summon a Marincess monster from your hand in defense position, except another copy of yourself. And then during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you get to banish this card from the graveyard and then target a Marincess spell or trap in your graveyard and add that target back to your hand, which is usually only going to be the trap unless somebody maybe pops your copy of Battle Ocean, which is very rare. We then play 3 copies of Marincess Seahorse. Seahorse is pretty good too, because she has the ability that you can special summon her from your hand to a zone a Marincess monster points to, and you only special summon Marincess Seahorse once per turn this way. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon 1 water monster from your hand to a zone a link monster points to, which is pretty helpful just to be able to link climb in this deck. It just really helps out a lot. We then play 2 copies of Marincess Mandarin. This card is pretty good too because you can, if you control 2 or more Marincess monsters while this card is in your hand or graveyard, you can target a water link monster you control and special summon this card to a zone that monster points to. It's very much like Performer Pal, or Perform H Hat Tricker, in the aspect that you get to just immediately special summon this card to your side of the field, if you have 2 or more monsters. We then play 3 copies of Silent Angler. Silent Angler is a pretty good card in this deck to help you go into some rank 4 plays, or even go into some XZ's plays, like going into link plays as well. It's a really good card, but the only downside of this card is it locks you into not special summoning from your hand for the rest of the turn. That's the literal only downside to this card, but it's an overall really good card in the deck because it helps you get more water monsters on your side of the field. And if you end with this card, it's totally fine. We then play 3 copies of Swap Frog. Swap Frog is a really good card in this deck that lets you discard a water monster to special summon this card from your hand, which is a really good effect just to be able to get you an additional monster on your side of the field. And when this card is special summoned, you do get to send a card from your deck to the graveyard that is a Aqua level 2 monster, which is going to be helpful because what you're always going to usually send is like a copy of Dupe Frog or Ronin Totem to give you additional plays on your side of the field. It also has the ability that you can once per turn return 1 card you control to your hand and then normal summon a frog monster to your side of the field, which is pretty good to be able to just get you an additional normal summon on your side of the field, but you do have to bounce this card to your hand to get that additional effect, which is not that big of a deal. It just helps out a lot. We then play a single copy of Dupe Frog. You basically play Dupe Frog in this deck because you can send it to the graveyard really easily with the copy of Swap Frog to be able to banish off your copy of Ronin Totem to give you an additional monster on your side of the field, which is pretty helpful just to dig into the deck. We then play a single copy of Ronin Totem. Ronin Totem has a pretty good effect too that lets you banish a copy of a frog monster in the graveyard and then special summon this card to your side of the field, but it can't be used as a synchro material, but that's fine. We don't play any synchros in the deck anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. We then play 3 copies of Ash Blossom, rounding out the monsters, because you really just play a Frog Engine and Marincess, which works out a lot. It's kind of like the Princess and the Frog, if you will, which is kind of funny for this deck, but it's really good and really fun to play around with. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we are going to be playing a single copy of Foolish Burial, because Foolish Burial helps us out a lot in this deck to be able to send stuff to the graveyard that we might particularly need, like a copy of the Duke Frog, Ronin Totem, a copy of one of your Marincess monsters, just to be able to get their effects off a little bit easier. This card's really good in the deck. We then play 2 copies of Battle Ocean. Battle Ocean is a pretty good card that all Marincess monsters you control gain 200 attack, and also each gain 600 attack for each Marincess equipped to that monster as well, which only usually comes up with the extra deck monsters, and sometimes you can equip up to 3, so it can boost them up by 2,000 attack points just with this one card. It also has the ability that monsters you control in the extra deck, or in the extra monster zone, that were link summoned using Marincess Crystal Heart as a material are unaffected by your opponent's card effects. And then when you link summon a Marincess monster to the extra deck, then you can, except during the turn it was except during the damage step, you can equip 3 Marincess link monsters with different names from your graveyard to the link summon monster, which is where it comes in handy about equipping the monsters, because it basically gives them 2,000 additional attack points, and it gives them the ability that they're unaffected by everything that your opponent has if you use Crystal Heart. We then play 3 copies of Cyanide Mining, rounding out the spells. This is a very trap-based deck, so you will play 3 copies of Cyanide Mining to round out the spells, because you get to send a card from your hand to the graveyard to add a Cyverse level 4 lower monster from your deck to your hand, which is literally the entire deck, which is pretty cool, outside of the frogs and outside of the Ash Blossoms. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, this is where the deck starts to really shine, because you play a lot of traps in this deck. So we're going to go ahead and open up with 3 copies of Marincess Wave. So Marincess Wave is probably the best card in the entire deck, with the ability that if you control a Marincess link monster, you can target a card on your opponent controls and negate that face-up monster's effects until the end of the turn. And if you control a link 2 or higher Marincess monster, all face-up monsters your opponent currently control or all face-up monsters you currently control are unaffected by your opponent's card effects until the end of the turn. And if you control a level or link 3 or higher Marincess monster, you can activate this card from your hand like an infinite impermanence, which is really cool. We then play 3 copies of Paleozoic Dynamuscus. Dynamuscus is really helpful in this deck, because basically what you're going to do is use this as like a karma cut to be able to discard a card from your hand to target a card on the field and banish it, which is pretty cool. And if you activate a trap, you can just special summon this card back from your graveyard as a level 2 Aqua monster, which helps you go into totally awesome. We then play 3 copies of Solemn Judgment, because just saying no is really funny. This card is really helpful in the deck, because when you activate Solemn Judgment in this deck, it comes in really handy to be able to always be able to pay half with this card, and being able to say no to anything is just great. We then play 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, because this card is probably one of the best hand traps in the entire game right now, and being able to activate this card from your hand to be able to target a monster your opponent controls and negate its effects is really cool, and being able to just activate this card directly from your hand during the first turn is also really cool. So that's it for the traps and the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing a single copy of Marincess Great Bubble Reef. Great Bubble Reef is a really good boss monster in the deck. It does come out at 2,600, so it's a little bit more attack points than Wonder Heart, but it depends on what you particularly need in the situation. So what this card does is during your main phase, or during each of your standby phases, you can banish a water monster from your graveyard or face it from your field to draw a card. And each time a monster is banished face up, this card gains 600 attack for each, which is pretty cool. And then until the end phase of the turn, you can send a water monster from your hand to the graveyard, special summon a banished Marincess monster, which is pretty cool because it kind of a roundabout way increases its own attack by 600 and revives something as well, which is pretty good. We then play a single copy of Wonder Heart. Wonder Heart is pretty good in the deck too. It's a helpful boss monster to help you go in for game, because what this card does is once per battle during your damage calculation, if this card battles a monster, you can quick effect special summon one of the Marincess Link monster cards that are equipped to this card. Also, it cannot be destroyed by battle, and you take no battle damage from battles involving that card. And equip that special summon monster to this card during the end phase. And if this card in his owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon one Link 3 or lower Marincess monster from your graveyard. So usually you're going to Wonder Heart first to be able to help you kind of OTK your opponent, and then you go into your copy of Great Bubble Reef later if you didn't completely OTK and blow them out with their copy of Wonder Heart. I play a single copy of Marbled Rock. Marbled Rock I kind of bumped down to 1 of because I don't feel like I use it quite as much because I climb into the copy of the Marincess monsters a little bit faster now, and I just don't need it. Well, especially with playing Totally Awesome at 2 in the extra deck now, you just don't need it. What this card does is it lets you target a Marincess card in your graveyard, and then you get to add it to your hand. You can only use each effect of Marbled Rock once per turn, and when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can send a Marincess card from your hand to the graveyard, and for that battle, that monster cannot be destroyed by battle, and also you take no damage. So basically, it kind of nullifies the entire battle. We then play 2 copies of Coral Anemone. Coral Anemone lets you target a water monster with 1500 or less attack in the graveyard and special summon it. It also has the ability, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target a Marincess in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. 1 copy of Crystal Heart, which is basically just a combo piece to be able to protect your other cards. 2 copies of Blue Slug. Blue Slug comes in pretty handy too because if this card is link summoned, you get to target a Marincess monster in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. And also you can add special monster for the rest of the turn, except for water monsters. Not a big deal in this deck. 1 copy of Sea Angel. Sea Angel lets you add your copy of a Marincess spell from your deck to your hand, which is Battle Ocean, is the literal only card that you're going to add from your deck to your hand with this card. But the only downside of this card is you can only link summon to this card using a copy of a Marincess monster. You cannot use your Toads to go into this card, especially with Blue Slug 2. You can't use it to go into any of the link ones, which is the only downside. We play a single copy of Access Code Talker just to give us additional pops on our side of the field. 1 copy of Transcode Talker because you can go into Transcode Talker with access or into Access Code Talker with Transcode Talker and use this card to revive back a monster in the graveyard, because when it's link summoned, you get to target a link 3 or lower Cyvers monster in your graveyard. You can send another copy of itself and then special summon it to a zone this card points to, which is always the down or the right zone. We then play a single copy of Splash Magician as well, because you get to target a Cyvers monster in your graveyard and special summon defense but negate its effects. So basically, if you can make Link 2, you can make a Link 4 in this deck, which is pretty cool because you use this with any other Cyvers monster that's in the graveyard. You summon Splash Magician, and then once you go Splash Magician, then you go into Transcode, revive back the Splash Magician, and then you link these 2 away and then go into Access Code Talker, and it gives you 2 different elements for pops, and this goes to 53 if you need it in a crunch. Now there's a lot of other really cool ways that you can go about that to get you other plays, but that's a big one to actually get you a lot of advantage. So for the rank 4s, we're playing a single copy of Abyss Dweller, which easily could be Bahamut Shark if you want to put in Bahamut Shark instead, but I like the 500 boost if it's using a monster that's originally water, but I just don't feel like I need the copy of Bahamut Shark with the amount of frogs that I'm playing in this deck as well. And it really helps out too, because while this card's on the field as well, you can once per turn during either player's turn detach a material from this card, and then this card during this turn negates any card of your opponent's that's in the graveyard, cannot be activated, which is pretty cool. And then we play Double Toad because Toad is really good in the deck too, and it's really easy to summon. It's pretty much a frog deck anyways too, with Marincess is mixed in. You can negate card effects and set them to your side of the field, which is pretty good. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really fun deck to play around with. It's pretty budget now, to be honest. The Toads are a little expensive, and the copy of Access Code is a little bit expensive, but the rest of the stuff is not expensive at all. It's actually quite budget outside of the Toad and the copy of Access Code. But it's a really fun deck. If you guys want to play a really fun deck and carry it to locals or regionals or something, this deck is a pretty interesting deck that's going to catch a lot of people by surprise. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below so you have all those awesome rewards, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.